In this session, I'm going to discuss about media logic theory. Let's get started. Media logic theory was proposed by American sociologist David L. Altheide, who defined media logic as a form of communication and the process through which media transmits and communicate information. A basic principle of media logic is that events, action, and actors' performances reflect information technologies, specific media, and formats that govern communication. A related principle is that communication guidelines become institutionalized and taken for granted, serve as an interpretative schema, and guide routine social interaction, and thereby becoming integral in creating, maintaining, and changing culture. It is an underutilized theory that examines content production, including news and how the processes that support the creation of such content impact information sharing. It falls under the symbolic interactionism paradigm, where meanings of things arise out of the process of social interaction. What people know and believe to be true about the world is constructed or created and reinforced and supported as people interact with one another over time in specific social settings. For example, something is a news story because an editorial team in a newsroom agrees that it is. And such a story is often recognized as news by others because of the way it is formatted or packaged. The sometimes absurd, routinized structure of news stories has been mocked by media critics and stand-up comedies in recent times. But how do such structures manifest? Answer is media logic. So what we are going to look at is how, how content production affects or impacts people's life and how people perceive to have some sort of an understanding around the world because of the existence of certain kind of content production and how those contents are created. So the whole creation process of that content gives some sort of an understanding to the people about the world that exists around them. Media logic theory is intricately connected with symbolic interactionism, and most of the times you have to understand that meanings are generated by getting yourself involved in the process of social interaction, how you're engaging with contents, events, people, how everything around you is constructed and created, and how you understand that construction process and creation process is something that gives meaning to those activities, events, things. We tend to agree that we can call a particular event as X event because everybody has agreed to, because the format, because the internal structure of that event lends itself to an organizational structure and it offers an understanding about it. So we tend to look at the world from the processes involved in the world. Media logic refers to the assumptions and processes for constructing messages within a particular medium. So irrespective of any medium that you pick up, the assumptions that we have around that or the processes that are involved in terms of the construction of messages gives us an idea about what kind of media logic is operated. What it includes is it includes rhythm, how the movement of a particular program or a message happens, or the grammar, what is it constructed of, or what is the format. The format, it could be, let's say, a quiz, a television quiz could be different than a travel documentary show. How do we differentiate between the two? Our idea that this is how a travel show works, or this is how a quiz program works, or how a newspaper report looks like than a magazine feature article. So we are being able to distinguish between these particular pieces of work because We understand the rhythm because we understand the grammar and we understand the format of these programs. Drawing on Simmel's insight about the nature and power of social forms, one can affirm that format, while a feature of media logic, is singularly important as a kind of metacommunication device because it refers to rules or codes for defining, selecting, organizing, presenting, and recognizing information as one thing rather than other. Example, the evening news and not a situational comedy, or a parody of news, not a mainstream primetime news. So we are being able to define one from another by looking at the codes, codes of structuring, codes of how this kind of a formatting technique works. So what's what Altaire is stressing upon is how these codes allow us to communicate across the world through the device of media logic by looking at information, by identifying information, by sometimes organizing, sometimes selecting information from one another. It could be priorities, it could be preferences. Why do we look at particular genre and we say that we are fond of a particular genre of content, be it in journalism, be it in um, television, entertainment world, or cinema. So if I prefer documentary films over mainstream narratives, fiction narratives, that's a choice. And my choice has come over a period of time because of my understanding, assumptions, and insights of that medium, the things that it offers, the formats that works for me. So constantly you're engaging within that paraphernalia. It is as though each medium is associated with its own code of interpretation, which the audience members recognize. So as consumers, we tend to understand, interpret, and recognize what could possibly be the code of each medium. What is the code for television? What sort of content television offers? What sort of content television news offers as against, the entertainment section or segment. People are fond of sports news in newspapers or feature stories in newspapers as against hard news. Or like I said, I prefer documentary over, mainstream narratives. So because I am able to understand what kind of a code works. The point is that media operates with a set of grammatical rules for using certain symbols and have developed general perspectives for interpreting various objects and events. So for each object and event, there is a general perspective that has been developed over a period of time because there are grammatical rules or symbols and signs at work. We use those symbols and signs, those tools, to understand and interpret things. How do we differentiate between fiction and non-fiction? Why do we call a particular category of content as fictional content and the other ones as non-fictional? So the moment you are being able to identify between fiction and non-fictional content, you're being able to do so because subconsciously you are trying to interpret the symbols at work, the codes at work, the various objects of interpretation. Remember this. In turn, audience members selectively adopt this overall logic and symbol system for making sense of media experience. So I know that what mainstream media is going to offer me. So I would apply that sort of a logic that, okay, there would be, massive sequences, sometimes nonsensical comedies, overlapping of same emotions and, dramatic performances by protagonist, antagonist, everyone, same sort of stories, no novelty as such. Whereas when I look at a documentary, it helps me travel across the world, assimilate cultures within myself, and then I get to interact and engage with characters who are real and whose narratives and stories are something that inspire me in one way or the other. or that brings me closer to reality and keeps me grounded. So this sort of a differentiation that I'm making as an audience member, I'm being able to do so because I'm adopting to the overall media logic, okay, and the symbolic system that exists within the media experience. However, since format comprise pre-givens or basics for interaction and communication, they tend to be taken for granted. So many a times you are taken in for a surprise. Many a times, a mainstream narrative can also be interesting. I don't know. But because, and a documentary film could be boring or could be something that might not be offering me something in return. So formats work on pre-given conditions. So our basis of interactions and communication that we have with the medium or within that particular format or content remains the same. And we often take that for granted. And there is a problem in that way because then you are uh, applying singularly one set of mediological rules. Formats are reflective of technologies, context, substantive and procedural familiarity, and intended audience. Let's look at this. Formats reflect technologies. Like I said, a newspaper content would be different than a television content because it involves two different kind of technologies. Even for consumption, you require a television set to consume television content, whereas you require a newspaper to read newspaper articles or features or whatever you want to do that. Then the formats is also reflective of the context in which things are produced. Like I said, a documentary is produced in a rather realistic context than a fictional narrative. And then it also reflects substantiative and procedural familiarity. What does it mean? Substantiative and procedural familiarity will refer to our connection, okay, our intimacy, our relationship with understanding what kind of substance or what kind of content or what kind of procedure is applicable to the format. Okay, any kind of format, television format, documentary format, movie format, newspaper format, magazine format. So they offer substantial content to us. So our interaction, engagement with them on regular basis gives us an idea about substantive and procedural familiarity and intended audience. So from a creator's point of view, understand that formats work because they reflect an intended audience. I know who is going to mostly consume the mainstream content as against content which is niche or content that is created for, an intellectual elite or people who have a certain viewpoint which is critical in nature. Okay, formats are also part of an ecology of communication, which refers to structure, organization, and accessibility of information technology, various forums, media, and channels of information. So this is what format does over function. Okay, what Altair is referring to here is that how it refers to structures, organizations, accessibility of information technology that is used, then the various forum that offers us formats across then media and channels of communication and information. Media logic, according to Altair, is central to the process of social construction of reality by individuals, as well as an institutional form of guiding organizational behavior and social perspectives about what is normal and typical. So our understanding of normalcy and anything that is typical uh, and our response, which could be defined as organizational behavior, as to how you're operating and behaving within, a society. If consider society to be an organization, or let's say a working setup, depends on how you want to look at it. How we are efficiently or inefficiently behaving within a certain community, how we are acting or reacting to certain sequences, situations that happen in our life are also somewhere subconsciously drawn from the social perspective that we build around what is normal and what is typical. How I would look at normalcy would be different than how you might look at normalcy. For you and me, the definition of normalcy could vary. It could be subjective or it could be objective regarding certain structures or certain understanding of the world. So we tend to apply subconsciously media logic to every form of social construction of reality. Okay, what do we mean by social construction of reality? That there is a certain situation that is there, and then we tend to associate the social norms and try to understand it from a lens or a perspective of the society, because we are a part of that society, because we carry the baggage the society has offered over a period of time. Sometimes it might come up as tradition, culture, nuances, norms. So we tend to apply media logic and look at reality from that point of view, which could be both individual as well as institutional, and that guides our organizational principles or behavior about defining what is normalcy and what is typical. The key element of a thoroughgoing theory of mediation built on media logic is not only that institutional media forms help shape and guide content and numerous everyday life activities, but also the audience's actor normalize these forms and use them as reality maintenance tool. So what this entire sentence means is the entire act of mediation, our how we look at the whole process of media consumption, um, could help us in looking at content or guiding our everyday realities of life. And we tend to subconsciously work as actors to normalize every form that is there. Let me give you an example which will make this sentence extremely clear. Okay, we see violent content. There is a possibility that that could induce violent behavior within us. Okay, you tend to often look at romantic films and believe that, okay, this is how the idea of falling in love could possibly be. There is a possible reason why mainstream news channels like Republic try to carry forward a particular slant of narrative that projects the right wing in the right way and tries to gather some sort of a consensus. Understand that more and more number of people accepting that as the normal makes that entire situation popular, and people think that, okay, this is the reality. So people tend to use via extra judicial actions or taking law into your own hand, becoming a violent vigilante, those sort of things which are naturalized, or for example any form of misogyny that you come across in television, or any kind of stereotype building that you'd come across in cinema. Over a period of time, that has worked, and it has gotten itself into a popular format because audience over a period of time tend to normalize these forms and they use them as reality maintenance tools. Somebody who has grown up with Hindi cinema, where constantly a character from the south of India is called as a Madrasi, and somebody who is a Sambar rasam eating person who is dark and pale and has a certain heavy accent to himself while talking in Hindi, and mostly created as a caricaturist sort of a character, somebody who has never been exposed to the real people in South India or has never been to Madras, would always use this as a realistic frame of reference. So understand that subconsciously we as audience, we tend to act, and our actions are around the normalcy that these forms offer, and we have created those things. So institutional media kind of works around the format and gives us this sort of so-called reality maintenance tools. Mediation refers to the impact of media logic and form of any medium involved in the communication process that is part of an ecology of communication that joins IT and communication, that is media formats, within the time and place of activity. Okay, so the whole entire process of how media logic works, or what sort of influence it has, or how a certain kind of form in any medium that is involved in the communication process works, and how they utilize information technology and communication processes or formats within the certain time frame of activities could be defined as the process of mediation. And it's extremely important when we are applying media logic into any kind of theoretical perspective or any kind of practical research driven engagement that we are going to have. Then mediatization may be regarded as a process by which this takes place. This entire process of mediation takes place, including institutionalization and blending of media forms. Okay, the very fact that you are born into the most latest media, that is the new media, which is again born out of the process of convergence. Okay, convergence will be blending of media forms. You know, there is print media, there's things there's content that is drawn from print media, there's content that is drawn from a typical video format that television uses or drawn from cinema. And then you have one page landing right on your screen, which gives you content across. You want to read something, you can read. You want to listen to something, you can listen to. You want to view something, and there's a small window that pops up and that redirects you to YouTube or Vimeo, and you can, you know, engage yourself in any kind of audiovisual content. Now understand that these sort of things that's happened over a period of time has happened because the mediatization process has been possible. The convergence has been possible. So it's the institutionalization of the mediation techniques or the processes that offers you a blended idea on understanding, an amalgam of different medium and the kind of content. And naturally, there is a fluidity in terms of content mobility. The nature, process, and significance of the definition of situation are paramount to this approach. Okay, so when you're talking about mediatization or the techniques of mediation, do keep in mind that the nature, process, and significance is extremely important to the approach, how you look at the process of media logic. Indeed, power is the ability to define a situation, and the interaction and communication which help accomplish and enact definitions are crucial to social order, social reality, and social change. So when we look at social order of any kind, social reality of any kind, okay, something that is an accepted social reality or any sort of a social change that happens, it is important for us to acknowledge and to define that how human interaction or human communication within a certain interface of media logic helps us define that thing. We look at everything from a media's lens or media's point of view perspective. What the media shows us that kind of governs our lives, or right from the clothes that we wear to the food that we eat to the kind of content that we consume, the kind of discussion that we have with most of us. Those things are possible because we tend to consume media left, right, and center. So media logic here reflexively shapes the interaction process with everybody across, even inside you. The dreams that you see, is also mediatized that way. Your basic routines and institutional orders, how you perform yourself or how you conduct yourself within a certain institution is something that also the media tells you. You want to dress smartly, media tells you what kind of dresses are available in the market that might make you look smart. And everyday life and institutional orders reflect and the reify communication order operating with same principles. So what it means is they are not separate anymore. So they crisscross time and again. And it's largely the application of media logic. It's largely the application of the consumeristic behavior or the value that pushes us to look at how the course of actions are going to unfold in days to come, how we want to look at things. Then the elements of media logic include the distinctive features of each medium. That could be newspaper, internet blogs, like I told you, what sort of content that they offer, and the format used by those media for the organization, the style in which it is presented, the focus or emphasis on particular characteristics of behavior, and the grammar of media communication. Okay, the entire operational aspect offers us elements into media logic. How we tend to distinguish between one format against the other. Then a major change in political communication noted by researchers involves the emergence, adaptation, and innovation of communication formats associated with more entertainment-oriented content. We try to understand that who is doing hardcore journalism and who is engaging in a little more of thrill-based entertainment-driven content. Okay, making the content relatively lighter while claiming that they are doing hardcore serious journalism is something that is also there. And most of the times you'll come across, especially if the web media or the mainstream television media has almost become like that. Numerous studies show how the process of media logic has influenced political communication. Okay, the entire election of 2014 in India, where the BJP won with the majority, or in 2019 also, or you can see a heavy PR campaign that has happened, and how media organizations almost became a mouthpiece for the right wing and trying to propagate one man for voting purpose. So mass media organizations, including journalists, adjust practices and perspectives to produce good television. Okay, that's there. There are quite a lot of people who are still engaging in free voice. They believe that media should be free of any kind of, political corruption, so to say, or there should not be any nexus between journalism and politics, electoral politics, so to say, and that retains the dynamics of, human engagement or human communication possible. Um, and it is only ethical that we produce good television content. But nowadays, you will see a lot of entertainment-oriented coverage of topics that is happening. The whole political culture is affected by expanding evocative formats, as journalists and news sources now routinely package events for media attention, including visuals, urgency, language, drama that will appeal to the audience, that will draw the attention of the audience. Look at numerous, regional channels, as well as handful of, mainstream media, English news channels in India, who engage in very tacky kind of flashy kind of content, and the kind of it's like more of histrionics and theatrical performances on screen, than real journalism or reporting from the ground. So I'll stop here. Thank you.